Welcome to a coaching session with John. He emailed me about coaching and agreed to come on the show. As always, from what I have seen, the people who need coaching the most don't ask for it, and the ones who need it the least do. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today we have John with us, and that's not his real name. He's on for a coaching call because he emailed me about my offer for a free coaching session, and he agreed we could record it and play it on the show for all of you to learn from. Hi, John. Welcome to Richer Soul. So glad to have you here today.
Hi, Rocky. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Congrats on reaching out and trying something to change your life. It's like leaping with a parachute, because you really can't get hurt to have a conversation that may change your life. So let's get started. John, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure. I live in the U.S. in the Northeast. I have a family, 2 young kids, 1 and 3. I'm 37 years old. My wife is 35, and we live a pretty typical life. You know, a house recently reduced down to 2 cars, which has been nice. Got a smaller house than we used to have, not much smaller, but small by today's standards, certainly. And financially, we're doing very good. I'm actually reached out to you just to get a variety of advice, I'm sure, but mostly just along the lines of trying to find a little bit more meaning in either the job I do or, possibly just some tips on how to, really find the job or career path that's more meaningful. There's a lot of good things about my job, but not that real deep connection to jump out of bed and do that work every day. Other than that, things are run of the mill, I'd say. But it's always interesting with a young family. So,
and you've been following the FIRE, Financial Independence Retire Early plan. How are you doing financially?
Correct. Yeah, probably for about the last 3 to 4 years, I'd say. Somewhere where I hit, I'd say, one of my burnout sessions at my work, I got kind of turned on to, I don't know, I'd say maybe it's in the normal realm of self-help, right? And that led to very quickly getting your financial matters in order and things like that. When I was younger, I used to think, people that read self-help, why can't they just live life and get along? What's so hard about life? But then I grew up and things became tough. But yeah, I got turned on to that for a variety of reasons, a couple different paths. I was really interested in entrepreneurship, getting my finances in order. And I'd always been a good saver. And my wife, likewise, always very good savers and pretty good earners too. We just didn't want to have to think about the money. Just, it actually was a blessing going through the global financial crisis because I never looked at anything. It was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. The worst thing that ever happened during that was that I was in such a conservative set of portfolios that I missed out on, for the first 13 or 14 years of my working life, I probably missed out on a life-changing amount of money. But all said and done, we're doing very good, like I said, just because of the saving and the earning that we've been able to, accumulate in savings. So we're floating somewhere around the 1.1, 1.2 million mark. I'm only that much in flux, not because I'm not certain of the numbers, but because there's a couple of little nuances to the situation that puts about 10% of that into question.
Wow, congratulations. That's impressive. At your age, to be able to save that amount of money shows that you clearly know how to get things done. And all I can say is congratulations. And for everyone else, it's possible. Here is someone else who's been able to do it. So that's just amazing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's certainly been a lot of hard work, and a lot of sacrifice, but not sacrifice that I would say was any kind of life, detriment to my quality of life. I lived cheaply through my 20s with the big things like cars and housing. That's what most people spend a lot of money on. Although I spent way too much on certain things like alcohol and things like that. But yeah, and other than that, just in general, throughout most little things that cause lifestyle creep, my wife and I were both very frugal before we met each other, and just so happens we came into the relationship very, very much as equals financially.
That's great to hear. Very
Yep.
impressive. So I guess I'm going to take a step back. Clearly, you're both frugal. Where did that come from? Is that something that you learned growing up? Where did that attitude come from?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I don't know, to put a term that I heard in the past that people have said that I think does ring true with me, even though I don't like the term necessarily. I think I always grew up kind of with a scarcity mindset. I very much until recently, and somehow it's still embedded in me. I still have this kind of, I have to, if for me to win a little bit, someone else has to lose. Now that's turned around in the last, I'd say 8 or 9 years as I've grown up, I think, but growing up, we were kind of, I'd say middle or lower middle class. It was always kind of I don't want to say we weren't really for want for anything, but we certainly didn't have fancy things. Father was disabled, and my mom was a nurse, and she supported the family with that. And through some circumstances that had to do with my father's past, he didn't get a whole lot in Social Security benefits. So yeah, we made do. There were 3 kids in my family. Yeah, my mom was pretty frugal, I'd say. We never went out to eat growing up. It was kind of like it's probably one of the biggest things you could do wrong in my family was to go out to eat, and especially to fast food. It was just not done. My father, for being home all the time, he did cook a lot. So that was kind of the big sin in our house, was to be seen like trying to sneak into McDonald's or something. We didn't really ever have fancy cars. We had all old cars. A lot of times we had 3 or 4 of them. We needed 2 backup cars because 2 were always broken. And my mom was just, she had simple, I learned a lot from my mom. She had very simple, cheap hobbies like gardening and things like that. And just kind of had a fix it herself kind of mindset. And my wife, I mean, I can't speak entirely for her, but I know her parents are even better with money as far as earning and saving. They are immigrants, and they just started from nothing essentially, and worked their way up into a very nice area of the country, and one that's not cheap, and they're doing just fine. But it's working 6-7 days a week, grinding to the bone. They've always been very good about earning and saving money, and I think that must have transferred to her perfectly. So
It's interesting. That seems to be a path with immigrants. They come here, they start with nothing, they work hard, and they become quite successful.
yeah.
One thing that does happen, and it doesn't sound like it's happened here, is sometimes the kids get spoiled because the parents don't want their kids to struggle. And unfortunately, that's a mistake that's sometimes made. It's the struggle is what makes us better. And so sometimes you need to let your kids struggle a little bit.
Yeah, I think they did something good with all 3 of their children. They didn't spoil any of them, I don't think, and they're on successful paths, all of them. So
quite impressive. So as you look back, did your parents talk to you about money, or did you just observe their habits?
yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, we didn't have right now. My father has since passed away, and my mother and I do have conversations now about money. Now that I've gotten so focused and serious on my own, I turn my attention to her finances as well, and I'm the executor for her estate, and we've been slowly piecing together things there. We're in a pretty good position. But growing up, it was kind of just always scarce. We didn't talk a lot about it, other than that we didn't have a lot. But in the background, my mother was saving very, very well. We just didn't spend a lot. She kind of had even though she wasn't an immigrant, she kind of had a parallel story to my wife's parents, which is she just worked really hard, saved a lot, didn't spend a lot on anything at all. It's almost to the point where I don't know how much she didn't really get out. Maybe she didn't get as much joy out of life as she should have. Hopefully we're making up for that now. But yeah, we didn't have, I wouldn't say we had like healthy conversations about money, but we also didn't avoid it. It wasn't taboo or anything. It's just, it didn't come up a lot. We didn't go on vacations ever. We had, I shouldn't say ever. We had one vacation when I was about 12 or 13 to an East Coast beach that was, a couple hours away. The whole vacation was a disaster. Car breaks down, but I was 13. It was the first time I'd ever saw the ocean. So of course it was amazing and wonderful for me. But that was the last time they ever attempted a vacation. To me, vacations growing up were just where, my friends went to leave me for a couple weeks in the summer. So I maybe that's given me a complex because I have no desire to go to Disney World or all these places that everybody loves going. But I have gotten a little bit better about vacations. My wife, likes to get away every once in a while. So, but we keep it reasonable. So, but yeah, growing up, there was nothing off limits for money, but it just didn't come up a whole lot.
All right. Now, you said that your mother may not have had as much joy as she could have. Is that something she's expressed? Is that something you feel?
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't think she would ever say that. I think she feels she had a great life, and I think she did as well. But looking back on it, I see maybe it's just a difference of the times, but I know I've been able to have, I wouldn't say more experiences, but I've gotten the opportunity at my age and my place and time in the world to go more places and see a handful more things than she has in her entire life, which is, double the length of mine. So I've really been trying to get her to come on some trips, and she's kind of set in her ways, and she appreciates it. But I think she appreciates her front porch and a cup of coffee just as much as being in Italy, seeing something amazing and having a small little cup of coffee she's not used to. So.
And that, I think, for each of us is to know what makes us happy, and then to follow that and be happy with that. And it sounds like she's done that, and so that's good for her. And as long as she's happy,
her lawn and her garden are big sources of happiness to her and her family, of course. But her hobbies are her yard and her garden, and she just loves working there. From earliest moment in spring that she can till the last bit of fall. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. She knows what she likes, and she spends her time doing it. That's
right. Yeah.
Something we can all learn from. So.
Yep.
What brought you here today? What prompted you to reach out and say, I want to chat?
Well, I'd had conversations like this with others that are, far ahead of me in terms of financial knowledge or life experience, and I've found them to be helpful. Probably my problem is more lack of follow-up on a lot of the advice I get, sort of like paralysis and inaction. I listen to a lot of podcast audio, and I know there's a lot of people with a lot of, a lot more experience than me that can kind of guide me towards things. And what tends to happen is I get a little bit too much information, and I can only act on one or two or three bits of advice at a time. So putting myself in the position to get, a fresh set of ears and some fresh perspective from another person is always something I'm excited to do, and not to waste anybody's time as if I'm not going to take any action, but I know myself, I really need repetition to slowly make progress. And I have made progress, but I've listened to your podcast, and I think it's great. I've loved every topic you brought up so far. I can't wait to see where it goes. And I've known you from some other forums, so I know you have really good thoughts to coach people with.
Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And to be honest, you've had quite a bit of success yourself. You've had financial success. So from that standpoint, that's not something that most people do. So it shows that you've taken action and that you can achieve your goals if you want to. You're doing some pretty smart things. Reaching out to people who are a little bit ahead of you to learn from them is an excellent way to figure out your next step. At the same point, it gets difficult. If I went and I had a golf lesson with Tiger Woods, I can assure you I would never improve. It wouldn't help me. I'm too far apart from somebody like that. But if I went out and I had a golf lesson with somebody who was just a little bit better than me, or someone who could just fix one thing today, then I could take one step, work on it. And it's constantly taking those small steps every day. Small improvements are what get us to move forward. And the fact that you're doing the small steps is impressive, because most people don't reach out. They don't do anything, and they don't take the step. And you've shown just through your financial success that you do take small steps, and over time it's compounded, and you've got great results. You're living step 1 and step 2 of the plan, which is number 1, live on less than you earn. Number 2 is save the difference. And the final third step is to invest it and make it grow. And even though you said you've made some mistakes in that area, it's still grown quite healthily. So you're living the plan, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I know you have some concerns with work, and we talked a little bit about that beforehand. You're saying your job is a 4 out of 5, but 5 out of 5 is kind of holding you back a little.
Yeah, and specifically, I now that we've moved, I have a very good commute, which honestly is sort of life changing to have a 5 or 6 minute commute rather than a 45-minute commute. I generally enjoy the people I work with. The atmosphere of the office itself is, nothing to complain about. And I really like my boss. He's someone I chose to go work for after being in a different part of the company. And honestly, I'm a pretty tough employee to have. And I do genuinely like him. I think that's most people's biggest complaint about work. But yeah, just that fifth point of, really finding meaning in the work. And if I really stretch, I can certainly find meaning in the work. It is meaningful work. It's just, to me, it's just not something that drives me. It's very noble and affable work, but it's just not something that, gets me going. I do dread the certain aspects of it a lot. And I've made a recent change there that's hopefully going to turn that for the better, taking on kind of a sort of a demotion, a little bit of a lesser role that will hopefully have repercussions and good repercussions in the stress management area. So I'm hoping to have, even though I have a little bit less responsibility and I guess authority, I'll also have, less responsibility and stress that goes with that responsibility. So we'll see how the transition goes. My wife likes to joke that, not in a mean-spirited way, but she's probably right. I'll probably never be happy with any job until I just quit them all. But I know that's kind of a dangerous path too. You don't want to have nothing to do. And I enjoy work. I really enjoy work that I choose to do, but I just haven't found a way to make any of those turn a profit.
Well, and it's difficult to create your own business and do your own thing. So what is it that causes the stress and anxiety at work? Is there something specific, or is it just deadlines, or what types of things bring that about?
Well, specifically, I won't get into the industry or specifics, but essentially I'm an account manager. And the job I sort of am pulling back from right now is an account manager, and I'm going to be a general resource in the pool of the engineering team once I make my transition final. That's where I originally came from. I was a programmer once upon a time, and kind of came up a little bit through the ranks, sort of. And when I hit a certain point at a project engineer or account manager, I realized I didn't really want that growth path any longer. So I shifted over from a project engineer kind of project management path into account manager path, thinking I'd learn transferable skills like sales and whatnot. But what I found is it's particularly difficult for me to handle stress when it comes from wanting to do something for the customer, even if they're being a little overly needy or over aggressive about what is satisfactory. I always want to please, but that can't be to the detriment of my company. And other people will put the brakes on that. Or sometimes it's just a matter of plain old resources. I can't get done what I need to get done for my customer, and it's out of my control to deliver that. Now, I can explain that internally to my managers, and they all understand and support me and always have. But I'm still the face to the customer of delivering bad news when I don't feel I have the authority or power to make certain things happen. And I'm smart enough at this point, I think, or experienced enough to know that even if I had that power, something else gets in the way. Because as soon as you get the power to solve a problem, you get more responsibility dumped on you that you don't have all the power to change. That's just how it goes in the corporate world. So I kind of became a realist about it. And I said, look, this role maybe just doesn't fit me. Maybe I was happier, or maybe I could be happier if I try something else out. And since I was in the position to, take that risk, I didn't ask for a transition. I kind of had to give them an ultimatum of leaving or trying something else. And they came up with that idea of trying something else when I kind of hit a breaking point where I got so stressed out that I said it wasn't worth my health. And I left the company or decided to leave, and they asked me to stay in another role. And I thought, well, that would probably be a good idea if we could try something else. So, but yeah, to answer your question though, going back, it was more about not feeling like I had the resources to solve the problems that were put in front of me, at least when it came from the vantage point of the customer. And I was overly eager to please, I guess. And that just seems to be ingrained in my nature, even though I know it's not always you don't always have to make the customer 100% satisfied if they're being unrealistic. That's still ingrained deep inside me to want to do that. And it's not realistic. So that caused the stress and the friction, I think.
But it seems to be improving. Is there something that you could do or some way you could make a shift that would get your job to go from a 4 out of 5 to a 5 out of 5?
Well, one of the things that's possibly on the table now is, as I said, I'm moving more over to being a general resource in engineering as a field engineer, and some possibly doing some training work. I don't have the skill set to do that. I've never done presentations without being a handful of people and getting butterflies in my stomach. It's a pretty specific skill set to learn. I'm hopeful for that. I think I like to teach and communicate. I just don't have the comfort with it yet. I would like that to be a bigger part of my future if I am going to stay in this industry, because also I feel like that's how to put it. It's not, I don't have much ambition to grow upward and onward. I just want to find a place where I can find some mastery. Now, that would be better if I could find some mastery in a skill, in a career that I care deeply for. But since I'm kind of a wuss and I won't jump to another career just yet, or I don't have a good idea of what I might like, I'm sticking with this one for the time being. But yeah, I think finding a sort of a niche and finding some mastery and really getting to dig deep into the knowledge base of what my company does is more appealing than trying to go too wide and grow and always taking on bigger and newer challenges. I'm realizing that about myself, looking around and seeing what other people do. It doesn't have to be what I do. And as I said, I have the financial cushion to make that choice. The other thing would, with a young family, it would be nice to have less hours. So if I did find myself in a position where I could be invaluable as a certain type of resource, whether, in one of these other areas, I would feel comfortable at that point asking for, a 4-day work week, or possibly even 3-day. But that might be a little tricky because I would like to keep my benefits. Not an absolute, a game ender if I lose the benefits, but I would like to keep those. So I'm not sure what amount of hours I could go down to. I don't think I'd want to ask for that until I became really critical and indispensable in that role. Not that I don't think they would give it to me. There might be some conversations I could have with my manager early on to do that, but I don't want to, force them into an ultimatum every 4 or 5 months regarding me. They might just decide, hey, enough's enough, and we're tired of your ultimatums.
That's always a risk you take.
Yeah.
So when I've heard a couple words here, and I'd like to explore them a little bit more. You talk about mastery and you talk about purpose. So is being a master at your work, would that give you purpose, or are you looking for a different kind of purpose than that?
I think it would give me a certain amount of more pleasure to not, to get a little deeper. This year I also got discovered I have anxiety, so I think that gives me a certain amount of. I always call it me being a wuss, but it's really just a matter of having some nervousness about things that are, uncomfortable or new. And, some people thrive in new challenges. And I think I do too, in a way. That's how I've grown in my career, and I've stepped up to challenges, but it's not something I necessarily seek out. I seek to learn things, I seek to gain knowledge in things, and I get shiny object syndrome just like everybody else. So that's maybe one of my problems. I don't have a deep, deep mastery of anything in my life. So I think that would give me a fair amount of joy. Now, I would much rather find something I care about and want to do, whether I'm a master at it or not. But of course, then if I care deeply about it enough and stuck with it, then I could gain that mastery as well and get my cake and eat it too on that one. But yeah, I think if I could flip a switch and have as much knowledge that would answer every question that would come my way in a certain role, just to eliminate that general nervousness when a phone rings or an email comes in. Okay, what is this? What am I going to have to go dig up? I don't mind the work, but sometimes when you're in an environment where the answers are both not already available in your head through experience, and they're not readily available without, as easily as you think they should be, given the type of industry you're in, I think it causes some frustrations, because in my mind, it means I or we as a company are not giving the customers answers as quickly as I feel we should be able to provide them as a valuable service. So that gets back to that friction of stress again, So yeah, I mean, if I would find maybe not more meaning, but certainly more satisfaction if I could have mastery in a certain role. But obviously, my first choice would just be to work hard and towards something I had a more fundamental, deep caring about. And I have a few of those things. I know what they are, but for one reason or another, I talk myself out of pursuing those industries. Whether it's, I've been away from this skill set too long, or grown away from this, and this would be far beyond me. I always make excuses as to why I shouldn't give it a shot or go for it. And I know, I mean, I'm a realist too. Some of my skill sets, certainly in programming and other things, they began to diminish shortly after university. I didn't really keep the skill set up. I dabbled here and there, and I enjoyed it more than when it was actually my job, because I was doing my own side projects. But I don't have that deep wealth of knowledge in those areas any longer either. So, I've kind of lost that. Like I said, I've never become a master at anything. It's a source of stress, I guess.
Your feelings are perfectly normal, and the things you're talking about, we all experience them. We don't talk about them, but we all experience them. It's relatively normal. But at the end of the day, I mean, you do have success. You've got financial success. It sounds like, for the most part, you're living in a job that's a 4 out of 5. You've got kids. You're happy with your wife. It sounds like a lot more parts of your life are actually quite successful than maybe you take credit for.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair statement. I certainly was born in a country and time and place that gives me a lot of advantages right out of the gate. So maybe I don't give myself credit for some of the things I've done right, even though I know I've done a lot of things right and sacrificed where other people kind of had splurged. So I do give credit to that, but In a way, a lot of my positions from the early one on up until now, I think I kind of grew to the next position before I was ready. That always caused me, or maybe I was put in those positions to grow faster by other people. It always did cause me a little bit more anxiety than probably I wish I had, and I saw that through my career. I saw other people who had, grown in their career paths to become some, let's call it a mid-level manager or something. And then they pulled back and they said, no, I'm not going to do that. I heard, oh, that guy used to be a manager and now he's back to doing this. And coming up through the ranks when my mindset was just, oh, people always need to be progressing onward and upward. I used to think to myself, well, why would they give that up? They were up there in the management level, and then they came back to be a worker bee. And now I fully get it. There's no chance I would ever want to be a manager, just with my temperament, my anxiety or whatever you want to call it. I would never take that job. I would much rather do what they did. So I was grateful to have those examples of people that did that, and they seemed like some of the happiest people because they knew where they wanted to be and they went back to it, where they could find some mastery. And I think about those people when I'm talking about that mastery of the job and, knowing what your position should be or what you're good at. And I certainly have gotten accolades about, being good at this or that. And everybody says I'm my own worst enemy, but it's fine to say that. It just doesn't help, but I do appreciate it's always good to get the reminders that, I've done some things right, and it's worth celebrating that at least. I need to focus more on that probably in general.
You've done a lot right. There's no doubt about it. And along the same lines, we all have that issue of fighting ourselves, and we are usually our biggest critic and the person that holds us back the most. And that's human nature. That's psychology. It's the way we're wired, and it's what we do.
Yeah. So, to be honest, I felt like I was much more happy before I paid attention to my finances and before I, was on this kind of like, take control of your life thing. When I was kind of just coasting like the rest of the world, I don't want to say the rest of the world, but a lot of the U.S. normal culture outside of like the financial independence and retirement early community. When I was just doing that and being quietly frugal and doing those things without paying a whole lot of attention to them, I felt like I was, I don't know, almost happier and more ignorant. But I wouldn't go back and change that. It's just, I don't know. I'm in this sort of in between no man's land where I know the things I should be doing or things I've done right or whatever. And I made some missteps. I tried, kind of jumping ahead or getting too smart for my own good in a couple of instances. But I don't know. Maybe that's it. I almost envy some people that just, go to work. They go to work because they have to go to work because they have no other choice and they don't think about it too much. I say that with a little bit of tongue in cheek because I don't envy them. I wouldn't trade places, but the simplicity of how it used to be is a little appealing now that I tend to overly concern myself with this, the numbers on the spreadsheet or whatever, I think I just need to relax. So.
It sounds like that. I think those people are on their way to work or at a 1 out of 5 and they're not very happy with their life. And so I don't think that's a place you want to be.
Yeah. There's no going back. I can't undo what I know now.
It sounds though like you still have some dreams and there's some things that you want to achieve, but you're hesitant. Are you willing to share some of those? You kind of alluded to a little bit there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in a sense, I'm going to use harsh words for myself, but I know I should speak more kindly of myself, but in general, when it comes to taking risks, I'm a big coward. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with anxiety. And I'm kind of just learning about anxiety as I, have been recently kind of told I have it. It's a little bit interesting, but it does go hand in hand. If you're concerned about things, you try to prepare for the worst or maybe much worse than the worst, right? So you never have enough. You never have this end game where you're totally secure, which is an illusion anyways. I know that in my head. I just can't wrap myself around it to to take it to the next point of having, okay, now that you know that mentally, now take action to do that. And that's where I freeze up. I said, no, just steady as she goes. Let's just keep the good things you have. Don't rock the boat. It's just cowardliness. And I can listen to the same motivational things that anybody else does. Oh, you only have one life, and live it. Take those chances. You'll regret it. And I know that, but maybe I hide behind, oh, I have a family and responsibilities to take care of. But the truth is, we would be good for a number of years at zero income, just with some reserves that we have, if I wanted to take a risk. I have this fear that maybe I wouldn't be welcomed back into the industry that I left, which I think is crazy. I'm sure I have enough connections there that I could, people that know my worth and would rehire me. It's probably that I'd be leaving a 4 out of 5 job and not a 1 out of 5 job. It's just good enough to keep me around. That combined with the cowardliness of not wanting to make a jump. But yeah, the other things I'm interested in are, I did some entrepreneurial side ventures with a few people, made all the typical entrepreneurial mistakes, making a company before we had something to to sell. It was interesting. It taught me a lot of things about working with other people and in times when you don't need other people to do a certain thing and it just gets in the way. I learned a lot of things. Also learned that entrepreneurship and being a business owner and earning money on your own, being responsible for your own income, not through a company that has hired you and trained you, that's a different kind of stress. I wasn't feeling the stress because I still had the backup income from my company and I was just doing this on the side, but I could really understand where that stress would come from. Everybody wants to talk about the good things of being a master of their own fate, for earning income, but there's downsides to that as well. But all the things I tried really it turned out to either be less interesting than my job or just, no better, so why take the risk for something that was no better? And to be more specific, I dabbled a bit in real estate, more like wholesaling and investing in that way. Learned slow, took a whole year, finally, did a deal, got a good chunk of money out of it, did everything wrong, should have been a chunk of money that was double that size. But I did everything wrong and still came out on top on that one. Learned a lot and learned, hey, even though it took me a long time to do that deal and I did one, I got one done. And then I quickly lost interest, almost like, I was on to the next shiny object. Even though I made a good chunk of money, when you average it out, I probably made 3 cents an hour over that year of learning. But the other things I tried were, with a small group of guys that I'd met at a local meetup for entrepreneurs, I, slowly over about a year and a half, we'd gotten to know each other and had a group, and the group expanded and contracted, and we formed a company just to form a company and do something. And we chased whatever the entrepreneur du jour thing was that in that 6-month period, things like, FBA, fulfilled by Amazon type stuff. And just realized that 3 people could crowd that out and communicate less than one person doing that same job could. And it just wasn't interesting to any of us in the end. I think that was the real problem. But on the side, I also picked up a couple little, I don't even want to say they were jobs. They were just activities that I was curious about doing to get back into programming. And I enjoyed these little, they weren't even big. They were just little bits of programming that I picked up. I really enjoyed doing them. I never enjoyed programming all through university and all through working as a programmer. I never, ever enjoyed really the modifying other people's code. But this was me creating something from scratch. It was a simple little thing, but it worked. And after some work, I got it to work and I was pretty proud of it. And it basically made me realize that I had a real deep passion for automation in general, but specific just automation type topics. I'm always fascinated about driverless cars and factory automation and things that come out in our society, just, we're always, making these technological leaps, and the impact of those revolutions on developing countries, I'm very interested in, just on society in general. Secretly, I kind of always wanted to start a podcast to talk about that kind of thing. And I had a couple, this is where it's getting a little bit personal, because I feel this is probably the biggest failure. There was no reason to fail other than I just chickened out. I did a couple test recordings. I hated them. I thought they were boring. They even bored me. So I did, instead of retwisting it and finding a new format, I didn't take that leap and just put it out there and see what happened. I kind of regret that. It's something I listen to a lot of podcasts. I would like to produce one of something I'm interested in, even if it didn't work out. I think that would be fun to do. And there's no reason I don't do it. Maybe a little bit of lack of time, but I'm sure everybody else is just as busy as me, and I should be able to, notch out some time, even if it's just once a week or once a month, even. If I have no need for it to be an income driver, why not? So that's probably the most personal thing I'll tell you, is I failed at that just because I chickened out.
Well, and it sounds like from all your other projects that you learned a lot, and you got through the first steps. And had you decided to keep going, it sounds like you would have made money or continued to grow to the point that you could. But at the same point, it didn't sound like it was your passion. And so you cut loose early, which is perfectly fine. And that's part of what life needs to be. Go try things, see if they fit with you. And if they don't, cut early and go try something else. And you're doing that. It sounds like you're making these choices. There's no reason that you can't continue kind of down that line.
That's a good point. Yeah. The cutting loose early is probably I don't know. Maybe I do that too much to a fault. I cut out things that I should have continued with even, but that's a good point. That's a good way to look at that.
So, I'm looking at the different areas that we kind of talk about. And the first is purpose. The second is health. The third is time. The fourth is money. The fifth is kind of overcoming ourselves. Then we have relationships and family. And then we have spirituality. And in our conversations with you, the money is clearly handled. You're working to overcome yourself, and you're doing a pretty good job with that. We haven't talked much about relationships and family. We haven't talked about time, which you just mentioned. In some of the comments to me before we started, we talked a little bit about health. And then the one underlying thing, though, and I think the one thing you're looking for is purpose. And I don't know, do you have a written life plan that says, this is what I want, this is where I'm going, this are the types of things that I want for my life?
No, I don't. And it's not because I haven't thought about doing it. That's probably what I've thought most about in the last 6 to 8 months is, I make excuses. Oh, I don't have time to sit down and think. Here I've notched out a couple hours to talk to you. So why couldn't I do this on any other given night if it's important? I think what I'm afraid of is that I'll sit down for hours and just stare at a blank piece of paper and not know what I want. And certainly this is the crux of the problem. If you don't know what you want to get to, you don't know what to focus on to get there. So I'm kind of, waiting around, and I try this and I try that and I go for that. And I think secretly I'm waiting to just hear some podcast or read some book or whatever that I'm just going to slap the book close and say, wow, that's the answer I was waiting for. Now everything's fixed. And I know that's not going to happen, but it doesn't keep me from, putting a earpiece in and listening to, a lot of audio content, hoping to find that one little silver bullet that I know. I'm too smart to know that exists. Everything that I listen to actually tells me the opposite, but I'm still thinking I'm just 1 or 2 podcasts away from really having something snap me into knowing my purpose. But if anything, I found the opposite. I found that it takes work and self-reflection and maybe a lot of trying things that don't work out, like I've been doing, I guess. But I just get frustrated that I can't just know it, and it's probably because I haven't. Well, I don't know. I maybe early on I just drifted a little bit. Even though I did the big things right, I didn't really take time to. I distracted myself maybe through my 20s rather than getting to know what I really wanted. And again, it was, I lived frugally, so I never had a deep need to reevaluate anything. I just kind of, did the right things, worked hard in university, got a good job. It wasn't it wasn't a passion job by any means, but, things were just good enough to not really, they handled probably my anxiety for a lot of years if I had it before, or maybe it's something you develop. I don't know. But even with the young family, which I find, can be very challenging. I love every moment with them, but, time, as you said, is one of those things. It's a resource you value when you have a young family. I find myself not being able to focus as much on them as I want. I don't know. I think I've kind of drifted away from the point, but yeah, it's just, I haven't sat down to figure out that written life plan because I'm afraid I won't come up with the answer.
And so fear is always something that holds us back. And that is always the case. On the other side of fear is abundance and a great life. There's no doubt about that. You're not alone in the way you feel. I think most people go through these types of things. These aren't the types of things that are taught. They aren't the types of things that are laid out for people, and they aren't. People just look at it and go, "Oh, that's kind of silly." And I get it because I spent a good part of my life doing that as well. There's 2 books that I mentioned in a previous episode, and we're kind of stuck here because these episodes haven't been released, but I know they're coming. And so we're going to address some of these things, but here we are kind of seeing it in reality. And I'm going to give you 2 books to read. They're both quick, easy reads. The first one, and you might even be able to skip this one. It's by Napoleon Hill, and it's called Outwitting the Devil. And the entire premise of the book is quite simple. The devil wins when you don't have a purpose, when you don't think about what you want to do, and you're not 100% moving forward in the direction that you choose to go. And there's a million things that put us in the drift, from schooling to religion to college to work to time constraints to money constraints. And we end up in the drift where we just wait for someone else to make a choice for us instead of making our own choice. The second book is Living Forward, and it's by Michael Hyatt. And what it's going to do for you is literally, you're going to read the book, you're going to reflect for a couple weeks, you're going to block a day out, and you're going to go write your life plan. And I know that sounds pretty simple, but I actually did it, and I had the same fears you did, and it works. If you just put, and it wasn't a lot of time, and I think the reason it worked so well is because there were so many different life plans in the book that I could go down the checklist and say, no, yes. No, yes. And literally, when I went to sit down and I locked out my day, I had been thinking for weeks. I had the thing, and I was able to just sit down, go through it in an organized, systematic fashion, and create my life plan. Now, that's just step 1. Step 1 is creating it. Step 2 is living it, which is probably even more difficult than creating it. So I'm going to give you those 2 pieces of advice. Is if you already know you're in the drift, and then you don't need to read about the drift, you can go straight to the second thing to say, I'm going to try this book to help me put together a life plan. And maybe this isn't the book for you. Maybe there's another book or another resource out there. There's tons of programs. You can find something that helps you sit down and say, how do I prioritize my life to the things that are most important for me? And once you do that, then all of your other questions become easier to answer. And it's simple because you say, if you said, I want to go on vacation, and say, I don't know where I want to go, it becomes very difficult to evaluate vacation choices. Well, there's a cruise to Alaska that's on sale, and there's a cruise to the Caribbean that's on sale. Well, I don't know. Those both look nice. What should I do? If you say to yourself, I want to go to London, and somebody comes to you and says there's a cruise on sale for Alaska, you go, that's wonderful. I'll think about it next time. I'm going to London. Do you have cheap airfare to London? Do you know hotels? Do you know a place to stay? Once you have that life plan and that purpose to say, this is where I'm going, this is what I want, all the other questions become so easy to answer. And so I will leave you with that suggestion to go and read the book, try it out. If you need help with it, I'm more than happy to follow up and do that. The second area that we probably need to focus on, because it comes up a little bit, and actually before we go to that, I want to ask you about the anxiety. Who or why all of a sudden do you think you have anxiety?
Well, I did go to it's easy for me to talk about now because after telling a few people, I found out, it seems like a lot of people have been to therapy at one point in their life for one reason or another. But I was a little, one of those people thought, oh, people only go to therapy when there's something wrong with them. A little too proud to admit it. But my work actually had a service that allowed me to see a therapist as one of the benefits. And I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. At least I'll give my wife's ears a break for a change. And I went and we had a couple sessions. And at first he was thinking maybe I had ADHD. And then we kind of explored the anxiety, depression. He kind of defined those a little bit as, depression's maybe a little bit more backward looking and anxiety is a little bit more forward looking or whatever. And I didn't really have signs much of depression in a way. But the anxiety, he gave me a simple little questionnaire and I ranked pretty high on the anxiety scale, apparently. So, it was a simple, chat with a therapist type of diagnosis. And I've been careful. I even in the conversation with you and I here, I feel like I've mentioned it enough times that I don't want to end up resting on a label and saying, oh, well, I have anxiety. I'm a person with anxiety, so I can't do X, Y, Z. I try not to do that. But even in this conversation here, I've probably talked about it more with you than anybody else, but I find myself already doing that, saying, oh, I have anxiety. So that's why I do this or that instead of just taking responsibility for it and just changing it. It almost becomes an excuse that you can rest on. But yeah, it was from a therapist who had told me that. No, I never got a second opinion. I probably will try out a different therapist. I did find it helpful to talk. But that's why I kind of have mentioned it a few times. It's kind of fresh in my mind because it was only about a month ago or so.
All right. And I'm going to be upfront. I don't have a medical degree. I don't practice medicine.
Sure.
It's just that I hear this word anxiety come up a lot. And I hear you kind of say, I've been labeled with it. And it becomes one of those scripts that starts sitting in our head that says, I'm a person with anxiety.
Right.
And I can't say you aren't. You've gotten pretty far in life without knowing it, without people telling you. We're probably all have days of depression and days of anxiety and days of fear and days of euphoria. It's being human. Mm-hmm. I just want to make sure you don't get stuck with a label that prevents you. And it sounds like you've already addressed that within yourself, that could be something that happens. And so,
yeah, I've seen it happen elsewhere, and it's hard. It's hard to not do it. It's so easy to rest on that and say, it's an easy out, and I don't want that to be me.
And I understand that. And I'll leave you with one just simple analogy. A man with a hammer in his hand sees everything as a nail.
Sure.
So, Be careful who you listen to.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's true. I like the advice on the living forward. I used to listen to a good bit of Michael Hyatt's podcast. I haven't recently, and I've not read Outwitting the Devil yet. I've read other books by Napoleon Hill, but that might be another good one to check out. But I will try out the living forward one. I really do feel like if I could get a plan together, I'm pretty good at following plans once I have them. But I've just been too nervous to sit down and not come up with anything. So it sounds like this living forward maybe has a little bit more of a structured approach. Even if it's not perfect, maybe it would get me started or get something in front of me. As I kind of told you in one of the emails previously, I have this, dream scenario if I actually had the courage to take the leap and just take a, whatever you want to call it, a sabbatical or a furlough from work, that I would all of a sudden, have all kinds of time to really pay attention and focus on, my wife and kids and do all the activities that we'd want to fill a day with and still have time left over to, exercise and get healthy and, all these things I make excuses that I don't have time to do now. I should just be doing anyways. But in my dream scenario, it's because I have an extra 8 or 9 hours a day to do these things. I would do all that, become healthy, feel like I've given enough to the kids who are growing so fast. And then all of a sudden out of that would blossom some life purpose that I didn't have time to uncover, and it would just magically flutter into my head, and somehow I'd twist that to earn money doing it. That's my dream scenario, but it's probably as likely to happen as a chicken egg popping out of my butt.
The silver bullet is already inside of you. You just have to uncover it. It's there, and you just have to spend the time working on that. And that's one of the things that's come up. I know you have young kids. I know how difficult it is with young kids. It sounds like your job, though, has reasonable hours. You don't have a lot of commuting time. So I'm assuming you should have a good amount of time to spend with your kids and doing things. But I get a sense that it's not in balance, that there's still something not right there.
Yeah, it's much better than it used to be. And my wife stopped working about, I want to say maybe, about 10 months ago or so. And that she chose to quit her career to be at home with the kids for at least a few years. And thankfully, she's liked it. I'm glad for that. I think she's doing a better job raising the children than I would if I had chosen to quit. And she went to work. I certainly would be good at doing it, I think. But I just think there's something she has that, she's a little bit more patient and skillful with the children than I am. Of course, I could step up if I lost my job and she went back to work. I think we'd be perfectly fine, and the kids would have fun. But yeah, I don't know. I think I just feel guilty that I don't give them, whatever's left to me at the end of the day. I am tired and stressed and sometimes I don't get my head fully home and out of work. I mentioned before, going to the therapist gave my wife's ears a rest. She never complains about me complaining about work necessarily, but I can just tell, people get tired of hearing the same thing over and over. So I try to check that. But at the same time, that also, it stifles my, the joy I wish I had at home sometimes gets muted by a stressful day at work. And as I said, that's all hopefully going to get better in the cutting the commuting time and not running back and forth to daycare as we did with my first kid for the first year and a half or 2 years. That's helped a lot. The home life has been much better for everybody. Everybody seems more relaxed. I'm more relaxed. So it's on the right trend. But yeah, I still just don't feel like I have enough energy to get up and do things, even on the weekends when we have ample time. It's well, going back to one of these things I've thought of for a long time. It's hard. There's barely enough time to just live life the way you want to and sort of take care of all the things on the to-do lists. That's a full-time job before work. So everybody's in the same boat there, of course, or most people are in the same boat. But I always joke when people talk about, hitting financial independence and, they say, oh, you need something to retire to find meaning and purpose. I sit there and look at my to-do list and think, it'd be 19, 20 years before I ran through this list and, was looking around for something to fill my time. So I feel like just the general minutia of living daily life and getting little things done is more than a full-time job for me. So I think that could fill my time. But yeah, whatever's left over, I seem to lack the energy I wish I had. Maybe it just comes down to exercise and getting my internal drive up and running. But yeah, I feel I don't give as much to the kids on the weekends as I wish I could. We do plenty. I don't know. I think back on we do plenty of things, and they have a lot of fun, and we're definitely fortunate to have a happy, healthy family. But I don't know. Maybe it's just I'm beating myself up over nothing, but I do wish I had more time for them.
So that's an area that you can sit down and easily track for a couple of weeks, is to say, when I'm home, how is my time being spent? And am I spending my time the way that I want to spend my time? Or am I wasting my time on things that aren't important? Or am I spending my time doing things that I don't need to do? So are you open to a couple suggestions in this area?
I am, and something just popped into my head, actually, that I don't know if this was what you had in mind, but I just recently, in the last few weeks, started using an app called Toggle to track my time at work for various activities. And I never really thought of bringing that into the home, but that's one thing as you were talking that just popped into my head. I'm not sure what you're suggesting, but yeah, I'm open to suggestions, of course.
So the first is, if you use an app and you're happy, track your time. So that just tells you where you're at. It gives you a clear picture of, this is where I'm at. Just like you track your money, you track your time.
Yeah.
The second thing is, it sounds like when you come home, you still have a little bit of stress. You don't have a very long commute. It's a few minutes.
Yeah.
My suggestion to you is to maybe take 15 minutes between work and home. Find a system that works for you. Everyone's got a different way of doing things. Maybe your therapist can give you an idea. Maybe everyone's got different things. There's meditation, there's deep breathing, there's just sitting in silence. It doesn't really matter what the system is, but if you can find a way to take 15 minutes to cut the cord between your work job and transition into your home life, and you can walk into the door happy instead of stressed, then the entire vibe changes and everything kind of changes at home. And your wife doesn't have to hear you nag because you've kind of cleared it and left it before you've come in. And I don't know if you've done anything like that in the past, or you have thoughts of ways that you might be able to incorporate something like that into your life.
Yeah, I did. That's, well, a couple of things. First of all, that's a fantastic suggestion. I have an idea of how to do that. You're right. My commute's not long. I never hated my commute. I hated the commute, but only because it took away from time with the family, or to whatever activity it was before I had the family. The driving doesn't bother me, and sitting in traffic doesn't necessarily bother me. I always made good time of it with podcasts or audiobooks or calling old friends or whatever. But you're right. I don't have that kind of decompression time anymore. And as much as I was saying about tracking time, I never did it at home because it just felt like industrializing the home life in a way, which, it just didn't seem right. But that's a really good point. And I guess one of my ideas is, I only live about 4 miles from work. It's not a very safe walk necessarily, but there's ways I could, manage that. I love to walk. I have some pretty bad medical problems with my knees, so I can't run, unfortunately. And I don't know. I've thought about, at least on decent days, walking to work and walking home, it would get more than my share of miles in. exercise and decompress. The reason I've hesitated to do that, I don't even mind doing it in inclement weather, like in snowfall or anything. But the reason I haven't done it is mostly because of feeling like I was stealing that time away from the family. But if it made me more focused when I got here, I could almost try to justify at least trying it as an option. But either way, I think maybe pulling over and, like you said, maybe trying a couple different things, either meditating or just, listening to something or, something to just indicate a shift from, work's over and now family time's going to begin. That's a really good suggestion, I think. And I have a couple ideas for that. I'm going to have my mind thinking about that one.
And the biggest thing is to try different things. For one week, you might try one thing, and the next week you might try making a phone call to somebody. You had mentioned that afterwards. So constantly finding different ways and see which actually gets you the best result. So test it out and see how it works best for you.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
The next area is once you know what you're doing, if there are tasks that you're doing at home that are low value tasks that you can get rid of, paying a small amount of money to have somebody else do it so that you don't have to worry about it is well worth it. So I don't know if there's things that you do normally at home that you might be able to outsource that free up some of your time. And in doing that, if you're dreading doing the task, that also makes it such that it kind of changes the vibe. Do you have any kind of things like that currently that you're doing that?
Not many. I've heard that suggestion before and thought it is a good suggestion. It is. I always thought it's a constant battle between me being frugal and not wanting to spend a lot of money on things versus some things are just worth spending the money on. But one thing that's kind of just an overarching general part of my personality is probably I could benefit a little bit from shopping around less for everything. Not material goods, but mostly big services. Like I have come to realize I did a lot of home improvement on my first home, all of it by myself. Damaged my knees and my body doing things that I was probably unqualified to do, but I got them done. I've since realized I don't like doing that and I don't need to do that. And I'm perfectly happy hiring someone out to do that. But it's such a slow and arduous process for me because I really want to feel like I found the best person, or not the best price, but the best price along with the best person. So I get 4 or 5 quotes for every single job, and it's incredibly time consuming. Whereas I should just ask a few people around, ask if they were happy, and go for it. Because what tends to happen is right now I'm sitting in a room that we've lived in a house for a year, and it's kind of been a storage room because I haven't renovated it yet. And I waddled back and forth, should I renovate it myself? Should I, pay someone to do it? And I kind of settled on, I should just pay someone to do it. But just the dread of shopping around for the best person that I trust to hand over, reconfiguring a room for me just seems to be something I avoid doing because, I'm generally distrusting of a lot of contractors because I got burned in the past, and that just leads to me being overly cautious, I guess, and always wanting to get 4 or 5, quotes on a simple one-room renovation. So if anything, I should probably just chill out a little bit and just, go with someone and say, hey, let's just get it done. So that could probably be beneficial.
And as you track your time, you'll be able to see what activities are taking away from your time that aren't productive. And so that's generally the purpose there. And it sounds like a couple little tweaks here, and you can pick up a little bit of time, and you can also have a much happier time at home.
Yeah.
One of the things that's come up is health. So when we look at your health, I know you mentioned a little bit about your knees. Are there some other things that you're not thrilled with regards to your health, or where are we at with this?
Yeah, I mean, I've I had a knee injury when I was younger, and that led to multiple other repetitive knee surgeries and general arthritis. For my age, I have terrible knees and a bad back that I've also had surgery on. But overall, I'm not drastically limited. I'm perfectly able bodied. It's just I can't run, or I get basically unable to walk the next day from the arthritis. And I can generally pick up and move big heavy things, to a certain degree without my back absolutely giving out. But I do lack strength. I don't have a great deal of muscular strength that I wish I had or I once had. Walking while healthy doesn't really get your heart rate up. So I've started running at least up the hills in my walk because that's a little less impact on my knees, but it still hurts like hell. I really used to enjoy swimming a lot. I was a good swimmer, and it got my heart rate up, and it kind of hit all those points. I think very well when I have water running over me, whether it's in a pool swimming or in a shower. I have some of my most creative and best thoughts. So I'd really like to be able to carve out time to and spend the money to join a gym. I used to belong to one, but I quit because they always had these water aerobics, right after work, right when a bunch of retired older ladies would be in the pool when they could be there at 2 p.m. I guess it was the instructor's limitations, but as soon as I went there after work, they'd all they'd be taking up all the lanes. So I kind of just gave up on it and quit. But that's something I really, if I had a few extra hours in the day, I would get back into doing that. I think that would be beneficial to my health. It's a really good source of exercise. But yeah, just generally, I mean, I'm not terribly overweight. I'm a pretty tall person, so I hide any weight I gain pretty easily. I'm as far as health and looks wise, I'm fine with that. But yeah, I just generally wish I could, get a little bit stronger and have a little bit more energy. One thing I didn't mention that's probably my lowest hanging fruit is I'm trying to get more sleep, and it's just, I don't know. It used to be that I never wanted to go to sleep, so I'd stay up very, very late. And the reason I didn't want to go to sleep was because I knew as soon as I went to sleep, I'm going to wake up and have to go to work. I don't have the same level of dread for each new work day as I used to, so that's not the problem anymore. I do think I resist the final falling asleep probably now more because it's a little bit of late night alone time that I can, watch a couple YouTube videos or listen to some podcasts. It's kind of a decompression time for me. And I've always been a night owl. So, but it does hurt me because I don't sleep enough at all. So that probably would help with my energy levels if I just focused on any one of those areas. A little bit more exercise or a little bit more sleep could probably be beneficial.
Why not both?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I'll have to give up the YouTube videos.
So your kids are now, your
Three-
older son, he's old enough to swim.
Yeah, we had a couple experiences over the summer. He enjoys it. I'd like to get him into it. I definitely want to teach him to swim as he gets older. Yeah, he kind of paddled around last year, but yeah, this summer I expect him to start getting a little bit more bold.
So, tying a couple things together, clearly, if you're swimming together, it becomes a family activity. So you're not losing time per se. The kids love to swim more often than not, so they're having fun.
True.
The other thing is, even if you stopped on the way home from work and swim was your 20 minutes of transition, I don't know how far the gym is from your house and your work, and if you could put together a plan to allow that to happen, it sounds like it would help you health-wise. It would help you for that transition. So now you're getting a 2-for-1 on there. And as time goes on, your kids could even come swim. So now you're getting a 3-for-1 on that.
Yeah, that's true. That's an interesting way to stack that all together. That's maybe I should relook at the schedule at the gym there and see where they've moved the water aerobics to, or maybe I can try to, shift my schedule to be a little bit earlier and get out of work a little earlier if possible. It's that's a good thing. That's worth looking into.
Or a different gym, or maybe even a different time. If it doesn't work at that time, maybe, you put the kids to bed and you go swim, and then you come home and you go to bed.
Yeah.
You have to figure out what works for you. These are
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. I like that idea of, like I said, just going back to what you said before about taking that break between work and home just to, you know, get out of work. I've done some steps well. I stopped checking my phone for the most part at really stupid times, like my work phone for email right before I go to bed. That was a bad habit I had for a while. Like, what was that going to do other than keep me awake on something I couldn't take any action on until morning? Once I realized that, I did stop that bad habit. But now it seems like I need a good habit in there between work and home to make that clean break and completely deactivate the work side of things. I think that's the something I really that's the one thing I really need to take action on immediately. But in addition to all the other things you said, but that's probably the thing that's sticking with me the most right now.
how late do you get to bed?
Oh boy, I got a alarm that yells at me pretty strongly to go to bed at 11, and that rarely happens. If left to my own, schedule, I probably wouldn't go to bed till 2 or 2:30, but I really force myself these days. I used to go to bed for many, many years, about 1:32 was my average bedtime, but I really force myself now to try to shut off everything and really go to bed at like 12:30, 12:40 at the very latest. But it's not uncommon nowadays that I shutting down and going to bed at midnight. It's some of the worst times is when I break my rule. I'll go into bed at 11:30 and then think, oh, I just got to check this one thing. And then I get lost in some, not necessarily work, but kind of personal work, emails or whatever. And, then 45 minutes goes by and I'm laying in bed and I'm all zombied out from the screen. That's never a good atmosphere for sleep. But yeah, it's pretty late, but yeah, by now I'm usually shutting down and trying to get to sleep by 12:30.
And what time you wake up?
About 7:10 or so. It's not a crazy bad amount of sleep, but it's almost 7 hours, sometimes 6.5 hours. So, but I never wake up feeling refreshed. I don't think in my whole life I've ever jumped out of bed and said, well, that was enough sleep. I always, I'm a slow, groggy waker.
Well, you may want to move your alarm a little earlier, knowing that you're then going to shut down after that and widen that out a little bit so that,
Yeah,
again, it's all on the scale of what's important to you and what
right.
works for your body. And there are people who don't need a lot of sleep, and then there are people who do. So you've got to kind of figure that out for yourself and see how important that is.
Yeah. Yep.
So we've covered a lot of different areas. And the reality is, and the analogy I like to write, when you're climbing a mountain and you look up at the top of the mountain and you're halfway there, it looks really, really far away. And it looks like a monumental task to get up there after you've just struggled to get halfway up this mountain. But when you turn around and you look at where you are and where you've come from, you realize you're in a pretty good place. And it's pretty phenomenal. And sitting here having a chat with you, I'm looking at you and saying, this guy's in a really good place. He's got most of his life together. He's got a couple little things he needs to work on, and he's aware of it, and he knows what to do. And if he takes a couple small steps, it's all going to work out phenomenally. Do you see that yourself?
Yeah, I actually do, and I'm very good at seeing how fortunate I am, but only for about 10 seconds. And then I delve back into I really should be doing this or that better and getting inside my head about it. So it's good to talk about it and get an outsider's perspective, because probably the truth is I listen to others more than I listen to myself. So it's helpful. But you're right. There's nothing I can objectively look at and say, "Oh, what a mess this part of my life is." It's all going pretty well. It's just it's a perspective thing, probably. So I need to maybe put some triggers in place to remind me of that more often, and be okay with the fact that the things I need to improve on are a little bit. It's okay if they happen one at a time and slowly. It's still marching towards progress. But I think having, like you had mentioned before, a life plan with a written purpose. They say the written part's important, but just even having it in my head, what is the end goal that I'm driving towards? That would really, I think that would give me clarity and purpose. More than just, the other thing. It sounds pretty terrible to say, "Oh, I need a purpose," when I have this beautiful family and wife and kids and people around me to do good things for. And recently, I listened to someone who said one of the best advantages that they had of being financially independent and not having to go to a job was they had time to be available for people, their friends. They didn't have a family or a spouse, but they said it was just a really good thing to have time to be available for people. And I've always thought that would be great. I'm a people person. I like to go see my, various friends. I was always the one to reach out and reconnect. But that was really good to hear that person who said it was a worthwhile purpose just to be available to people and be rich in time to be able to give to people who were more limited in time. And that's probably been the first spark that I've ever had to think, okay, maybe I was on the right track. That is maybe it's not noble but it's a decent enough purpose, and it seemed to work out well, at least for this one person. So that was encouraging. Sorry, I went off on a tangent and rambled there again, but yeah, I do see I'm in a good place. So it's good to get an outsider perspective of that as well.
And I think we don't need these grandiose plans. We just need a simple plan that makes us happy. And if that's what makes you happy, is to have the time and the freedom to go hang out with friends and do what you want, that's actually pretty cool. That's kind of what we were like as kids, right? We didn't have to worry about anything in the summer. We just hung out with our friends and life was happy as could be.
That's right.
So if that's what you're looking for, that's perfectly fine. And that's a worthwhile goal. We talked a little bit about money, and I just want to make a comment here, because you actually have a net worth statement. You know where your money is. You also know how you're spending your money. You know where your inflows are. You know where your expenses are. You know what your taxes are. And I just want to commend you for that. Very few people actually sit down and write that all out. And that's another thing that's coming out in episode, for those of you who've been listening, episode 7 was all about that. You need to know where you're at financially and where you're going financially and how you're going to get there. And from what I've seen from what you sent me, you've got a pretty clear plan there. I don't know, though, do you have your freedom number in mind of how much is enough to walk away and say we're done with it all?
I wish I did. Again, this comes back to probably being too conservative, but I know I could retire, quote unquote retire, quit my job now and be probably pretty well off on a basic salary, doing generally unskilled work. If I were to choose to do that, my family would probably survive and not starve, and we probably wouldn't lose our house. We have enough of a cushion there. I think I figured out, if I had say a $20,000 a year job that had benefits, for example, we'd probably be okay indefinitely, or maybe scale up the money a little bit without benefits if I had to pay for them on my own. As far as health insurance is what I'm specifically talking about. But, on the other side of that, so in a way, if I found some passion job, if I want to go, when I was a kid, I kind of wanted to be a forest ranger or something. Maybe it's something I should look into. But, if I had something readily available nearby to go do that, I could probably make that jump and be fine. But on the other side of it, they always say use this 4% rule or the times 25 number. Or if you're really, really conservative, use the multiply by 33 of your annual expenses number. If I go that route and think really conservatively and not really doubling my yearly expenses, but I know we live somewhere around the $45,000 a year mark. But if I add on to that, here's what I need to cover healthcare on my own for the family. And here's what I need to cover, not a typical year or whatever, or I start fluffing up the number with all these what ifs, and quickly it becomes $75,000, $80,000 a year that I'd like to, quote unquote, cover myself for. So that number is very high. Whatever that multiplier is for 25, it's probably more like 2.5 million as a net worth, financial freedom number. Obviously that moves the goalpost quite a bit to be a little discouraging. Even though I know there are encouraging things like, I could take a much less paying job now and be okay. That alone is empowering and a good thing to have worked for. It definitely gives you some freedom of being more true to yourself rather than feeling like you have to. I know it leads me to be a more honest person at work. I can speak my mind and not be afraid. I think it also, strangely enough, makes me more valuable because people know I'm not sugarcoating anything or telling them what they want to hear. I think there's value in that as well.
There is. When I look at your numbers, and I don't know if you've actually projected forward, it's not going to take you that long to get to a number that will pay out $70,000 a year for you.
I have trouble with the projection forward part. I don't have the skill for using a financial calculator, so all I can do is do simple little tweaks. I always miss out on the compounding. The only other problem with probable problem with my investments are I do have some cash holdings to hedge this a bit, but in my investments, I'm very aggressive because I feel I have aggressive goals. We're very aggressive, 95 or 100% in passive index fund stocks, but I know that doesn't match my risk tolerance. My risk tolerance is very, very conservative, but I felt I was trying to make up some ground for all those years where I was in such an incredibly conservative allocation of stocks and bonds. They probably had me in something that was more suitable for, a 59 or 60-year-old. And I was, 21. My first 10 years of working, I had the most conservative portfolio you could possibly choose because I just didn't understand when I was letting other people deal with this, I was just in a target date fund and I just picked the most conservative thing and nobody ever questioned it. Nobody said, hey, you're 21 or you're 24. You should be taking a lot more risk. I just, I missed out on a lot of good years of compounding, I think, from that. But the counterbalance to that was I was socking away a lot of extra income that I wasn't spending. So that kind of helped.
I would sit down and run your numbers going forward. And if you want help with that, I can help you do it. But you're at the point where you're at the bend in the curve in the sense that it's going to take a few years. And when I say a few, I mean it could be 10 years. But literally, if you set forward a plan and if when the kids started school and your wife worked a little, honestly, I think inside of 10 years, you could have enough money to be done and then say, we're just going to do what we want. And not to say you're going to stop working, but it's the point where you could stop working and take a job for $20,000 a year and have no worries, because you will have the financial cushion there to do what you want. So as you put together your life plan, I'd also sit down and run these numbers forward, because I think you'll be surprised at how far along you are on that ability to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel, which might make it easier for you to continue on your 4 out of 5 job while you search for that passion project that gives you the opportunity that you can just walk away and say, you know what, I'm just going to do this now. And if I don't make money for 2 years, it's okay. I'm just going to become a master of it, and eventually I will.
Yeah, no, that'd be great to get some help with that. Probably the biggest thing I need help with is just controlling my unrealistic, conservative buffers that I keep wanting to tweak into the actual numbers. I have good actual numbers to work with. I just, I get to be a scaredy cat and I just pad them until it's an unreachable goal again. So.
We all do this. This is normal. Everyone who's in your situation, people, who have millions of dollars, go through the same thing. It's that little bit of fear, that little bit of worry. They want that extra security. It's normal. I would suggest that you get a little bit more involved in understanding your investments and understanding other ways to make money grow outside of normal stocks and bonds and paper assets. You're at the point in the curve and the time in your life where you might be better suited making different investments that would create cash flow for you to be able to live the life you want without worry. So that may be an area for you to explore a little bit more. The other thing, and I know you mentioned it in the comments, this market is going to go down. When? I don't know. It's going to go up. Markets go up, they go down. It's life. When the market goes down, the thought process should be this. If my neighbor's house was on sale for half off, would I want to sell mine or would I want to buy his?
Mm-hmm.
So when the markets tank, that's not the time to sell. That's the time to hold on and pick up deals.
Mm-hmm.
It is the most difficult thing in the world to do. When you look at the statistics and you look at the behaviors of people, everybody buys high and sells low.
Yep.
In 1999, in the internet craze, nobody was selling into the craze. They were all buying. And in 2008, when the market tanked, nobody was running in buying. They were all selling. And so we do the opposite of what's common sense. You're aware of it, and now you've got to go through it because it will happen. I don't know when, but it's bound to happen. It happens all the time. And you're now at a place where you've got a large enough pot that you lose a few $100,000, you freak out. I know I did.
Yeah.
And because I freaked out, I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars that had I just closed my eyes and held on, I could have made. But that's just life.
That's one of those other problems is since I've been paying attention to the finances actively, we've, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate. We've only been going up for the last 3 or 4 years in the greater trend of things. So I haven't really seen the downturn since I've been, having my eyeballs on it. I was talking with a guy recently. I have this little group of 4 or 5 people in my city that I kind of gathered up as far as people who are financial independence interested in that topic. And we talked about it last week. He says, I just want it to happen so I can live through one. so he knows how he'll react. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty interesting point. I've been crossing my fingers that it's not going to happen, but of course it will. You know it will.
Historically, they happen about every 7 years. Yeah. I think that's the average cycle to where the bottom will drop out over something.
Yeah.
So it does happen. We forget, and we act delusionally when that happens.
Yeah.
So here, I thought I'd have an opportunity to do some great coaching, share all these wonderful insights. You're hitting across all these different areas so well. Every area that we're looking at, we have small tweaks, but nothing in your life is out of balance, and you seem to have wonderful success.
Well, I've still gained a good deal of value from this conversation. I hope it doesn't just come across as one person just whining a little bit too much. I have taken a lot of time and a lot of energy to make improvements where I can, but I think I'm just frustrated sometimes. I haven't come up with all the answers, or at least the answers that are appropriate to me, or as you pointed out, even the right questions. Where am I going? That's maybe where I need to start. But I've gotten a lot out of this conversation. I really do appreciate it and your time.
I'm glad I could help. But before we close out, are there any areas that we should have talked about, or that you want to talk about that we didn't cover?
Well, you touched on other investments. We didn't really get into the other things I've done there. I've done a little bit in real estate as I talked about, but that's a whole huge topic. And all I'll say there is I had a little bit of success in doing some investing, just one area for real estate, and then I had some major flops. I carried a lot of guilt with that because I invested, thought I knew. It's kind of almost laughably cliche, but to lose money on a real estate deal. But I thought I was too good, too smart for my own good. I thought I knew something others didn't in a particular time and place, and it bit me, and it made me gun shy. It probably made me more aggressive over in the equities, but it made me a little gun shy to real estate. Even though I still believe in real estate as a vehicle for gaining wealth and preserving it, it has made me a little gun shy, or maybe a little bitter towards that. But I am trying to kind of forgive myself for that bad investment. I'm trying to say, made the best decision I could at that time and place with the information I had. But I think the reason I carry a little guilt with it is because I was kind of the headstrong one that wanted to do the investment, and I didn't muscle my wife into it or anything, but I didn't give her the opportunity to kind of be the cooler head and talk me out of it, which is something she's pretty good at. She's a pretty level-headed person and thinks through things, doesn't get as emotionally excited about things as I do. And, I'll admit it, I got stars in my eyes. I thought, hey, man, this is going to be a home run, and it's going to cut our time to financial independence in half, even though I didn't really have an FI number, which is kind of silly to say. It's going to cut my time in half, even though I don't know what the end game is. It's stupid to say that now, but, I got greedy, and I wanted to take a shortcut for the first time in my life, and it bit me in the butt. So I got a little gun shy there, but it hasn't ruined my faith in real estate as a investment vehicle, but it's just made me, probably set me back a little bit in that regard. But no other real major areas to talk about, I don't think. Just need to get my head right, I think, and get focused on discovering my purpose a little bit, and I think that book's going to help a lot too. And giving myself a little bit of time between work and home life, I think that's going to be another big win right there.
Are you going to make that mistake again with real estate?
No, probably to the detriment of passing on good deals, but that's fine by me. It was a big enough hit, substantial enough to that's the only way I learn. I pay big amounts of dollars to learn lessons. So
We all do that.
Yeah.
Unless we're smart enough to watch someone else make a mistake and learn from their mistake, in which case we can save the money at their expense.
That's right. Yeah. That's actually the only reason I started paying attention to my finances in the first place is I had a pretty bad financial advisor that put us into some heavy front-loaded Class A stocks that, funds, Class A front-loaded funds that, it was just a bitter pill to swallow to have to pay an entry fee. I was talking about everything in finance in terms of, poker antes at the time because I just didn't have the vocabulary and I was ignorant. And just having to pay that money up front seemed wrong. So it triggered me to start looking into it and quickly realizing that, that whole old adage about, nobody cares about your money as much as you do. So I started getting educated on it, and it took, I don't know what it was at this point anymore. I can't remember, but it was upwards of 10,000, maybe 12. I paid a lot of money, and it just stuck in my craw enough to make me shape up and say, I got to get serious about this. So, but it was money well spent because I probably benefited from it now in the end more than that fee I paid.
And sometimes we need to pay that fee to have an education. And it's not a matter of the fact that we fail, because we will fail. We're going to fail. We're going to fail over and over again. Question is are you going to learn a lesson? And are you going to get back up and take the next step? And as long as you do those two things, there's nothing wrong with failure. And you go. It's okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great chatting with you. I think that people listening will learn a lot, and they will have an opportunity to see how all of these different areas come together, how to create balance, and how if you take the time, you follow the plan, you can become wealthy. And along that same thing, though, the money alone isn't going to make you happy. We still have the same problems with and without money, with our health, with our time, with our purpose. And as always, overcoming ourselves is probably the biggest obstacle we have to face. Until we do that, things don't always work out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I appreciate your time, and I agree. I think, it's just getting to know yourself, and I got to focus on being okay with incremental improvements. So
that's all it is. Take one step at a time, and you end up with a great life. Well, thank you for joining us today, John.
Yeah, thanks, Rocky. Have a good night.
I hope you enjoyed today's coaching session. As I mentioned, John already had a pretty good life, so for him, small changes can really make a large difference. Knowing your purpose and being part of something bigger is also very important, as money alone doesn't guarantee to make us happy. If you'd like a coaching session and you're willing to come on the air, please reach out to me, or if you prefer, I also do private one-on-one coaching. Thanks for listening today.